Hi, this is Speak Your Mind on Gold FM, and I'm your host, Shami Lochenlal. It's an honor and my pleasure to introduce my guest to you. Guest on Speak Your Mind today is the Honorable Minister for Employment, Productivity and Industrial Relations, Honorable Jone Usamate. Sir, I welcome you on Speak Your Mind and like to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Sir, ever since you have moved to this ministry, the Ministry of Employment, Productivity and Industrial Relations, what reforms have you taken place?
Well, I think the major sort of change that we've done over this past year is to relook why we exist, basically to have another look at the vision of the ministry. And over this past year, we've changed our vision from what it used to be to become now a bit more focused on employment growth. So now the major vision that we have is decent work and employment growth. And that's quite a major change for us. So we're not only looking at making sure that the work that people are involved in, that they get what they're supposed to be there, but at the same time, there's now a stronger focus on making sure that there is employment available for people, or that people can have access to improving their livelihoods. And that has been a major change from us. And that is, I think, is also going to be something that we'll have to continually focus on into the future. Growing employment is not something you can do in one ministry. It has to be something that has to be addressed by all of government, but at least in our ministry, because we have a stronger focus, we have the National Employment Center, that is going to be one of our major focuses. The other thing that's going to be very important for us that we're focusing on now is responsiveness. Being able to respond quicker and much more effectively to issues that when there's non-compliance of the laws that we have, and try to be a bit more proactive in what we do, rather than wait for bad things to happen. Take some action to stop the bad things from happening in the first place. So, I mean, that is probably the major response from us, and it has been, this is now reflected in our mission also. In the mission of the organization, very much a strong focus on generating employment growth, on promoting and enforcing decent work, not only decent work, but productivity, on encouraging good faith employment relations. So these things are very important. When you want to have a good industrial relations climate, there must be good faith between both parties, the workers, management, and the organizations. And enforce safe workplaces. We want as much as possible to have safe workplaces and to ensure social justice.
So as you speak, I guess the Ministry for Employment, Productivity and Industrial Relationship, the focus is big, the goal is big, objective is great. So you have enough staffing who can carry out the enforcement and the projects and work which is given to them.
Yes, we've for a long time there's been a focus. I mean, traditionally when you look at the Ministry of Labor, it's a very reactive focus. You know, people break the law, then the inspectorate comes in and tries to remedy the situation. So that continues. We need to be able to continue to do that. One of the things that we've done now is try to take more actions that prevent the problems from happening in the first place. How do you do that? One is you make sure that your inspectors are going to inspect the workplaces before the problems are reported. So the more you can inspect, it's more likelihood that you'll be able to eliminate the problems before they become complaints to us. So there's more of an emphasis on prevention and on getting parties to self-regulate themselves, rather than regarding the ministry as like the big person with a big stick that comes around and hits your head when you do something wrong. Get the parties to understand what their responsibilities are and do something about it for themselves, in themselves, before the ministry becomes involved.
So how much more efficient has the ministry become ever since you took over, as you speak of all the reforms that has taken place?
I think for that you'd have to look at some of the basic statistics, and the statistics in terms of some of the stats that I do have for the different parts of the ministry. The thing about as I mentioned before, what were in the legislation that we have now established this need for all organizations to have labor management, consultation, and cooperation committees. So these are bipartisan type of mechanisms within an organization in which they try to discuss the problem areas that they have and try to deal with them before they become industrial relation issues.
Which is imperative.
That's absolutely imperative, because you can't sort of wait for problems to explode and then try to deal with it. You have to have these preventive mechanisms. So one of the things that we've done over these past few years is make sure that as many as possible of these committees are set up, that the training takes place. On the other side, for occupational health and safety, we make it mandatory that we have these committees that are in place within workplaces, that training takes place so that people are well aware of what are the requirements for OHS compliance are, and then they enforce it themselves within their organizations.
So is this across public sector and private sector both?
Totally. It's a requirement for all organizations. For the Labor Management Consultation Cooperation Committees, any workplace that has at least 20 or more workers.
Are workers implying to that? Are they enforcing all this?
See, one of the purposes of all of this training is to make sure that workers are aware of their responsibilities and that they take some action on it. Now, of course, if these committees are not functional in any organization, they always have the right to be able to deal directly with us so that we can take action on these issues. But that has been a strong focus of ours, to make sure that these committees are functioning.
Are employers taking this proactive step to having these committees within the organizations?
They're always the good employers, the ones that know what their responsibilities are and do something about it. And there's always those that, that probably just don't bother. But if you don't bother, then the ministry will come after you. But we would like people to be well aware of their responsibilities and do something about it themselves. Because at the end of the day, if you're talking about occupational health and safety, if you're an organization that wants to make a lot of money, you need to have a workforce that is committed and healthy. If you have a workplace that is safe, there's more likelihood that you'll get a lot of productivity out of them. So it's in the best interest also. We encourage employees to do the right thing. If they don't, well, we will then take action on them to make sure that they do comply.
You had mentioned earlier that sometimes people think that the Ministry of Employment, Productivity and Industrial Relations is a ministry where they carry a big stick and they tell people that it should be implemented. What happens to them who break the law? What is the brunt they face?
Well, there's if for instance there is an organization that has not paid the kind of wages that should be paid, or has not been paying overtime pay, or those sorts of things, we have a number of sort of gradual steps to try to bring these things to a solution. Obviously, if a worker feels aggrieved, then we bring the worker and the management together for them to discuss this issue. Hopefully, they can decide on a solution. That is carried out through our mediation services. If they cannot agree to a solution, then that is taken up to the tribunal. The tribunal is where a judge, a magistrate sits and decide who's doing the right thing, who's doing the wrong thing. He may then impose what the fine should be, what the penalty should be. But we focus a lot on getting the two parties to agree to the solution. Because when you have two parties agreeing to a solution, because they've been part of the making the solution, you'll have a higher commitment to implementing the solution. And at the same time, because you've been part of coming up with that solution, it gives you an opportunity to repair the relationship between the two parties.
Yes.
Because if we are arguing, and somebody come and impose a solution on us, one will win, one will lose. But if we agree to the solution, we can walk away, solution is made, but at the same time, we repair the relationship.
While it may be, while you may face less challenges with public sector complying and enforcing certain rules and regulation which is in place, how is private sector cooperating?
There are, again, excellent private sector organizations. I think the larger organizations tend to be very good, and there are those that are not so good. We know that in a lot of the smaller and medium-sized enterprises, this is where we have more issues. We also know of particular sectors where we tend to get more complaints. One particular sector that has been a big issue for us has been the security services. Not security in terms of the police and the army, but the security companies.
Yes.
That has been an area that we receive a lot of complaints. And I think another one has been the construction sector. There's a big construction boom going on at the moment, and we find that a lot of the large companies that win the contracts, they're okay, but then they subcontract to a smaller company who subcontracts to another one.
Yes.
And it is often these subcontractors of the subcontractors are the ones who don't really comply. So in terms of overtime pay and all of those things. So we try to work with these organizations.
And the ministry is keeping a close eye and
yes.
watch on that.
Yeah.
We'll take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about a minister's recent visit to New Zealand to meet with the seasonal workers, and we'll also go into depth looking at the ministry's role. Right back soon after this break. This is Speak Your Mind on Gold FM, later to be viewed on FBC TV and replays on FBC TV as well. My guest is the Honourable Minister for Employment, Productivity and Industrial Relations, Honourable Jone Usamate. Sir, we were talking about labour laws and we were talking about OHS compliance. How successful has the ministry been with the labour inspection and workers' compensation?
Yes, well, as I'm mentioning, inspections is a way that we can try to be proactive. Visit organizations to try to make sure that if there's something wrong, if they're not compliant, we can address it early. So the good thing about over the past few years, we've had a major emphasis on increasing the number of inspections. Because if you increase your inspections, your number of complaints will go down. If you have low number of inspections, you'll have a lot of complaints. So over the past few years, for instance, in 2016 to 2017, the inspections have been now more than 3,000 inspections annually. And the good thing about from these inspections, the money that is recovered. For instance, if you go to a place and you find out the person was not being paid for overtime pay, getting the company to pay that amount of money that we've recovered has increased from around 366,000 in 2016 to almost to more than 730,000. So through these vigorous inspections that we have, targeted inspections tries to make sure that we address issues quickly. At the same time, as I mentioned before, it's a proactive tool. Once we know the sectors in which we get the most complaints, we then target more inspections for those particular sectors.
So who are these sectors? Who are the
Well,
companies?
I think over the past few years, it has been the security companies. There have been the construction sector recently, and also the wholesale and retail sector. So once you know the sectors where we have the problems, then we send our inspectors there. When we also know what the sectors are, for instance, for the security companies, in order to be proactive, we also have talked to the Ministry of Defense so that we know who the companies that are security companies, so that when they want to go for registration to continue their business as a security company, the Ministry of Defense will check first with us. Have they been good in terms of paying giving their workers their due? If they have a bad record for us, Ministry of Defense might then decide not to give them a license to continue in that sort of business. So that's the sort of approach we are now looking to for other sectors, hopefully for the construction sector, where we have issues like this, and but it's more like a proactive approach to addressing this issue. So that's been a good record from our inspections. The good thing also for inspection now, when we recover money, previously people had to come to Suva to get the actual cash. Now all the money is dispersed electronically. So it's placed into your bank balance. So if you are in the middle of Tavua, you don't have to come to Bar to get the money. It's just put into your bank account. That makes it much more efficient and much more effective, so people can get the money that is due to them much faster.
You mentioned about construction companies, and we have had some talkbacks around construction companies with contractors and Consumer Council and other stakeholders. Will there be some kind of law put in place to monitor the movement of construction companies and how they carry their jobs? Is there anything in place at the moment, enforcement?
Not in my ministry. I mean, nothing related to that. But what I am aware of, what I hope to do in my ministry, because I know a lot of the companies are getting jobs from government.
Yes.
And now what we're hoping to do is work with the other arms of government. If there's any construction company that gets a job from government, that it will not be allowed to take up the job unless it has got a good record in paying its workers what is due to them. That is something that we hope to work with, probably with the ministries that are giving out a lot of these construction jobs, like the Ministry of Education. So when you subcontract your jobs to another company, you'll only be allowed to subcontract to a company that has been doing well by paying its workers what they are due.
You mentioned about security and construction companies. What are your other major concerns as the Minister for Employment, Productivity and Industrial Relations?
In terms of
what you wish to, since ever being in this ministry, what are some major concerns that you're looking at?
Okay. Well, the other issue that we're, of course, always very concerned about is occupational health and safety. More and more now, we see that people are losing their lives much younger. Sometimes we're getting workplace accidents. And one of the things that the ministry we want to see reduce is the number of days that are lost because of injury. Right? So if we have safer workplaces, one, it has an impact of having a more productive workforce. And at the same time, they have more productive days to put into the work. So it has good returns for the company on its own. We have this requirement that all workplaces, not companies, all workplaces that have 20 or more employees should have the occupational health and safety committees that work and function to make sure that people are working in a safe environment. We are running a whole host of programs to make sure that that people get the training that is required for them so that they can keep the workplace safe. And even in places where they have less than 20 workers, they can also have OHS reps that do these things. So the safety of the places in which people work, that's very important for us. And that's related to a lot of the work that we do around the occupational health and safety. Because
Sorry, sir. Sorry to interrupt you, sir. We'll take another break, and when we come back, that's when we're going to talk, carry on with our question of Minister's recent visit to New Zealand. Soon after this break, and we encourage you to call us on 3220906 or 3220907 to ask the Minister any question during this show now. This is Speak Your Mind on Gold FM, and my guest is Honorable Jone Usamate, the Minister for Employment, Productivity and Industrial Relations. Sir, recently you visited Fiji seasonal workers in New Zealand. What was the highlight of your visit?
I think it was great to actually meet the workers. It wasn't only New Zealand; it was actually Australia and New Zealand, and to get some very positive feedback from some of the employers. And especially, we did not have things did not go too well when we first started off, because in Australia, for instance, in the first year, we sent around 137 workers, and then the year after, the number really dropped because a number of them disappeared. They didn't finish their contracts. But this time around, when we went, for me, the most gratifying thing was to hear from the employers themselves the improvement in the reputation of some of the workers that we had. We started off in this system, in this program pretty late. Other countries have been sending workers from 2008. We only started from 2015. But to actually go there and listen to them, telling us how they appreciate the productivity of the workers, the ones that have stayed and done a good job. And that is brought home to me the importance of the changes that we've done to the scheme. Because, we've now changed the way in which we manage the scheme. Before we just opened it up, whoever wants to do the seasonal work, come and apply. Now, we focus on the people in the rural areas. Because these kind of people, one, they are the kind of people that can do that kind of hard work. And secondly, it's also a way for us to allow them to stay in the rural areas, go and get some money and take it back to the rural areas. Because, we've got a big problem now in Fiji, too much urbanization, too much people coming into the towns and cities. So for me, the greatest reward was to hear the appreciation that these organizations have for our workers, and just to see how dependent that horticulture and viticulture and agricultural sectors of both Australia and New Zealand are so reliant on the workers, not only from Fiji, but also from the Pacific Island countries.
And I think the seasonal workers must have really appreciated and would have been very happy to see the Honourable Minister personally visiting them. And a great initiative by this government to actually start again the seasonal worker scheme. So, how are the Fijian seasonal workers paid? Are they paid according to the New Zealand wage guideline?
The good thing about this particular program, when you get the government involved, any employer that wants to take a worker from Fiji has to first apply to the Australian or New Zealand government. So the Australian and New Zealand government will not allow them to be part of this scheme unless they meet the minimum Australian and New Zealand standards. So the kinds of pay that they are paid is according to the requirements in those countries. They cannot pay below the minimum or the sectoral rate that they have in those countries. So that's why it's a very good system for us. It gives I sleep better at nights knowing that workers are protected by the agreement that we have with the Australian and the New Zealand governments.
So they're paid in Australian dollars or New Zealand dollars according to their wage they have. So how many Fijians are working in New Zealand and Australia, and are you thinking of increasing the number in future?
We're always trying to increase. At the moment, I have around more than 1,200 that have already been vetted and certified and safely and sitting in our pool ready to go. But over the past year, last year we had slightly over 200 in New Zealand and slightly over 200 in Australia. I think we have the capacity to go up to 1,000 or to 2,000 workers. In New Zealand, it's constrained by the cap that the New Zealand government has put. New Zealand government only puts a cap of 11,100 workers from all of the Pacific. and the countries in the Pacific, they compete for that. In Australia, there's no cap. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for us to get more workers into Australia. And this is something that we will be continuing to explore. We're considering putting our own liaison people into Australia and New Zealand so they can market the Fiji product and also visit our workers, do some pastoral care, discuss their issues with them, be the voice also for the workers to their employers and so forth. So our aim is to grow. We want the numbers to grow, moving to Australia and New Zealand, which in turn will allow them to earn more income to improve their own livelihoods.
So at the moment, I think the seasonal workers are mostly working in fruit farms. Are there any other opportunities for Fijians in New Zealand and Australia, or what kind of job are we looking at?
In New Zealand, at the moment, it's limited to horticulture and viticulture. In Australia, it's a broader. We also have people in Australia that are working in hotels, in the hospitality sector. So that is excellent for us because, a lot of our hotel workers here, during the high season, they get work. After that, they're laid off. So there's an opportunity when they're laid off here, we can try to get them to work in the hospitality sector offshore. We have, last year, we had people in Christchurch working as carpenters. And those people also got some training and so forth. Some of them have gone back. So there will be opportunities for other sectors. But I think the greatest usefulness of this scheme is for the unskilled people that we have here getting the opportunity to go and earn income there. Because I'm cognizant of the fact that we need our skilled workers also to be here. So the opportunities for unskilled workers is the ones that I'm really excited about.
So how has the seasonal worker scheme benefited Fiji's economy?
Well, you think about it. If I have one person that goes to Australia and brings back $10,000, and if you have 1,000 people all bringing back $10,000, that money will not be taxed, but they will go and buy things from the shops. They will spend money on other things, so that money will circulate in the economy. It can be means a 1 million of $10 million that can be injected into the rural sector just by people going and bringing that money back. We've had people come back with 20,000 Fiji dollars. 20,000. There's not too many civil servants who can save $20,000 in 6 months, but some of these people are coming back with that kind of money. So it's a real boost, not only for themselves, but for the area in which they live. Some of them start small business. Some of them start employing other people. So they create economic, they create economic opportunities for others. So
there are so many good things which branches out of this seasonal worker scheme, where they get a better life, which I think definitely this government is focused on giving Fijians a better standard of life. So how many of these seasonal workers are males and females? What's the gender balance?
Yeah, the majority at the moment is males. I think perhaps it's because now when you do work like apple picking like that, climbing up and down ladders with a 20 kg basket inside of you, can require males. But there's no limitation. We don't, there's no, some kind of work, both males and females can do it, and they do go. We went, for instance, to Kerikeri, north of Auckland, where we have a group of women from Vaturoba who have been going. And the employer was very, very happy with their performance last year. So there are opportunities. I've been to packing houses where they pack all the fruits, and there are Fiji women also working there. But at the moment, the numbers are still very heavily in favor of the men, but we hope more opportunities come up, more women will be able to attend and earn some money for their families.
I think this is a great news for Fijians in regards to the seasonal workers scheme. And more Fijians are going to benefit, as you mentioned, in future. We'll take another break. When we come back, we are going to look at the employment growth in Fiji. How many are employed? How many are unemployed? A number of youths, etc. Plus, we are also going to touch on the national minimum wage. Interesting topics we're going to discover in our next segments. Do call us and join the discussion on 3220906 or 3220907 on Speak Your Mind. Welcome back to Speak Your Mind. I'm your host, Shami Lochan, and my guest is the Honorable Jone Usamate. Sir, we talked about the seasonal workers. Is there any plans for retired civil servants being engaged in employment in Fiji or other South Pacific islands to benefit? Does that come under your ministry?
Yeah, well, actually, under the National Employment Center, which is a key part of my ministry,
we do look at volunteer type programs. And what we do is that we register civil servants, ex-civil servants, and we have a number of them that are now working in other countries in the Pacific. We have teachers, for instance, that are working in Tuvalu and in the Marshall Islands and so forth, nurses also in Tuvalu. So it gives them an opportunity for these people that have a lot of skills to be able to go and use their skills for the benefit of other countries. And at the same time, too, it frees up our own space here in Fiji, because we know we have so many young graduates coming out of our tertiary institutes, and we need to be able to provide them with those opportunities. So I know that we have nurses and we have teachers that are now placed in a number of countries around the region, and they are giving back. I mean, they're providing assistance to those countries, and at the same time earning some money for themselves.
Yeah. So it's when you say voluntary, that doesn't mean that they are not paid.
Oh,
they
no.
are definitely
No, they're
earning.
definitely paid.
Yeah.
What happens in this case is that half of their salary is paid by the host country, and the other half is paid by our National Employment Center. Though we've been discussing with a number of donor countries whether they would like us to help us foot that particular bill. But it gives us an opportunity also to assist our neighboring countries.
I guess it's a good way to utilize their expertise, something which they can give back to other communities around Fiji, outside Fiji area too. So has there been any employment growth in Fiji in the last 3 years? And what does the statistic reveal?
Well, the unemployment survey for 2010 to 2011 had an unemployment of around, I think it was around 7.1%. Then we had the unemployment survey that came out for 2015 to 2016, had it around 5.5%. And then the census came out, it was actually 4.5%. So it shows that unemployment has reduced over the past few years. We know that a significant portion of our workforce is still in the informal and subsistence economy. That is around about 2/3 of our workforce. That's the way it's been. But in spite of that, what it does show that over this period, there have been employment opportunities created. There have also been livelihood opportunities created. And part of that, I think, is as a result of government's total program. One, it's opened up a lot of investment into infrastructure, opening up the roads, the lighting, and all of these things, making it easier for organizations to invest in Fiji. And all of this has created these opportunities for unemployment to go down. Unemployment going down also has its problems. Because when you have unemployment is too low, that means there's going to be competition for workers. And as you have competition for workers, there is a possibility of wage inflation. The cost of labor also goes up. So everything that's good, sometimes there's a flip side to it too. But we are glad to see that those opportunities, that unemployment has gone down. And it's our focus now to try to make sure that we will be able to keep people usefully employed into the future.
So what you're trying to say, and of course the statistics also reveal the figures that unemployment has gone down, and with Fiji First being in the ruling party, maybe in the years to come, you're trying to say that you will continue to give excellent results in future too?
Oh, definitely. Our focus will have to be to identify the kinds of sectors in which people can continue to be employed, because the kind of work that people are doing now is not going to be the same kind of work that is going to be done a few years from today. Yesterday I was talking to somebody from Singapore where they're already talking about driverless taxis. Imagine if we had driverless taxis in Fiji, what would happen to all of our taxi drivers. So what we're doing as a country is looking at these are the kinds of things that we have in our national employment policy and our strategic development plan. We're trying to identify the sectors in which Fiji should invest in so that people can continue to be usefully employed into the future as the world of work changes. As technology changes, a lot of the things that we're doing now become obsolete. The things that we're learning from university become obsolete. So our whole systems must be geared to making sure that we're producing the kind of people that will be able to do the work of the future. And that is going to be continued.
So you have envisioned all those things and definitely working towards the demands of the 21st century and as we change in technology.
Yes, at the moment in my ministry, we basically completed the consultations on our national employment policy. In that national employment policy, we have 10 policy areas that government needs to focus on in order to not only grow employment, but the quality of employment. There's no use having a lot of employment and people are getting lowest possible wages. You need to have a lot of employment where people are earning more money. And that requires a look at education systems, all of these other kinds of systems. So that's all part of our national employment policy that will Once it's finalized, it'll be taken up to cabinet for its approval.
The ministry does have plans to create more job opportunities in Fiji as we speak.
Oh yes, we're in working in partnership with other government ministries. Obviously, the Ministry of Agriculture, agro-processing of goods and services from that particular sector, Ministry of Industry and Trade. There is now a program going on in government to speed up the rate at which one can open a new business in Fiji. E-governance, opening up to everything to be online. So all of these initiatives across a range of different government departments and ministries will help create the kind of employment that we need in the future.
We have got another group of people with less advantaged people or people with disabilities. Opportunities, does the ministry see any positive contribution by its stakeholders to absorb people with special needs? How is people with disabilities? What is the plan for them so that they are absorbed in mainstream employment with other stakeholders?
Yeah, I think there are already some incentive schemes in place. I think there's some tax rebate scheme that's currently with the Fiji Revenue and Customs Service, that if you employ somebody that is physically challenged, you can get a rebate on the amount of money that you pay for that person, up to 300% what you pay for that salary. We also have some requirements in our Employment Relations Act where companies are encouraged to employ those that are physically challenged. And I think there's a disability, there's a bill currently in Parliament. I think it's in committee that also looks at the requirement of the disabled, those that are physically challenged, and there might be something in relation to employment there. There's now a lot of focus on making sure that the disabled can access any building, buses and so forth. Increasing the accessibility will make them hopefully much more employable.
There has been much talk about the national minimum wage and calls. So when we come back in our last segment, we're going to talk about this important. And if you want to call and ask the minister any question, our number is 3220906 and 3220907 on Gold FM. Speak Your Mind. So we are in our last segment on Speak Your Mind on Gold FM with the Honourable Minister Jone Usamate, who's the Minister for Employment, Productivity and Industrial Relations. Sir, calls are being made that minimum wage rate should be increased to $4 to $5. Some political parties have been venting about this. How viable is this? Is Fiji in a position to do this soon?
I don't think so. I think you take somebody who runs a small village shop that has a turnover of around maybe $100 a day or so forth. Will that little village shop be able to pay the $5 or $6 an hour? Most possibly not, because if you raise it too high, you will force these small and micro enterprises out of business. I was brought up in the Wakansla settlement on the verge of outside Colombo. So there's a small, this place where they clean cars. So I went there and asked this, how much do you pay? Would you be able to pay $5 per hour? He said, if I had to do that, I'd close this business down. So when we look at national minimum wage, you need to consider that the national minimum wage is for the small micro enterprise, not for large companies.
Unskilled workers.
Unskilled workers. If you have large companies that are paying national minimum wage, that company should move the wage up. Right? If you have somebody that is selling things in the market and they got somebody working for them, the national minimum wage is for the person that works for them. It's based, you need to be able to balance the requirements of the micro enterprises with the wage that they can pay. But when government does its programs, you have the national minimum wage, then we have the social wage component, the other assistance that government provides that is intended to benefit those that are at the lowest level in our sort of in terms of earning income. That is why you have the free education, the free hospital, the free medicine, the free bus fare for schools. All of these things is means tested and targeted at those that are earning lower incomes. Even your cost of electricity bills, your cost of water bills, for those that are earning the least income, they get assistance from government. So this is what government does. It grows the economy. We've had 8 years of consecutive economic growth. And the money that we get out of this growth, we make sure that we channel it back to the least advantaged.
Yes.
We give them assistance for training, social welfare, the pension, the pension for all those people. That's
Yes.
targeted at those that have the least income. We don't want to raise the minimum wage too high, because you might do that, you might kill a lot of the small businesses that are growing. So you need to be able to, the way that it's set now, we are setting it so that we can grow the small enterprise, the micro enterprise, and at the same time we have this targeted assistance at those that need that assistance. So I think the way that we have it at the moment is currently set at just below 60% of the median wage, which is like the target that people use all around the world. And it will basically serve two things. It will make sure that we look after the least advantaged in our society, and make sure that we also maintain our growth.
Yeah.
Maintain our
And
growth.
there has been 2 reviews already, right? Two increases to the national minimum wage. Are we going to look at any other alterations to that? Will it increase by some percentage in future?
Oh, definitely it would be reviewed. I mean, we had one in, was it 2014? It was $2 per hour. Then it moved up to $2.32. And now it's $2.68. And I think, I can't say for sure when it would take place, but there would be that review that takes place. But we don't only have the national minimum wage. We also have the wage regulation orders for different sectors. So we have the wage regulation order for the security sector, the manufacturing sector, and so forth. These ones are also reviewed on a timely basis, and they've been reviewed on a timely basis also. So we have the national minimum wage, and you have these wage regulation orders for 10 different sectors. Those ones will also be reviewed. And it depends also on how well that particular sector is doing.
So what it means, or what we get out of this is that the promises made by some political parties is not viable, is not realistic, is just trying to get people emotionally involved in this, and especially when they're saying that there should be a national and increase to the national minimum wage to $5. You mean to say that that's just uncalled for? It could never happen.
Yeah, I think it's just populism, just trying to appeal to people emotionally. But when you're considering the national minimum wage, you've got to look at the total package the government provides. It's got a national minimum wage at that level, and it has this whole host of other things that it does for education, for electricity, for water, that is targeted at those that earn the least income in our country. So in that way, it balances out. That way also, the benefits you get from economic growth, some of that benefit comes back to those that are earning the less income through the social wage component that we're talking about. Assistance for education, the wheat picks, the bus fare, assistance for electricity, for water, all of that is targeted at those that are earning the less income. And at the same time, we're making sure that our micro enterprises, our small enterprises begin to grow. And eventually they'll employ more people, and that will lead to the benefit of the whole country.
So are you trying to say that the national minimum wage rate at the moment has sort of reduced poverty at a national level?
Well, I think, I don't remember the exact stats, but the consultant that we used at that time was Dr. Pata, I think, from USP. He showed that the impact of the national minimum wage together with all of the other, assistance programs that government had been implementing had a definite impact on reducing poverty levels. That was in the consultant's report. That's not my finding. That's a report that we used from the consultant that we got from USP, who's done a lot of work in this area. So he was just not looking at the national minimum wage itself, but in harmony with all of the other initiatives that government had put in place, the social wage components. You have to take all of that into account when looking at that impact on the individual.
So as we round off, is there anything else that you'd like to bring to our attention in your closing remark on Speak Your Mind?
Well, I think one of the important things from my ministry at the moment is the importance of good industrial relations between workers and management and so forth. And we continue to be involved in this. And I think at the essence of this is always good faith between workers, good faith between trade unions and the management of companies, and good faith between all the parties, and the continuing of social dialogue, being able to discuss issues. And for Fiji's long-term benefit, this will be something that's very crucial for us. We did not have a strike or lockout for many, many years. We had one issue with ATS that was thankfully resolved by the tribunal, and that is something that will continue to be our strength if we continue to participate in the social dialogue. When we have issues, we discuss it and try to get them resolved. As Minister, I am currently involved in some of these discussions with some organizations. I think that's very crucial for us to maintain that social dialogue between parties that have some sort of conflict. Because conflict is something that you will always have.
You mentioned about the fact, sorry to interrupt you, said the ATS matter has been resolved.
Well, the ATS matter has been because it went to the tribunal, and once the thing's before the tribunal, as a minister, I cannot. No, the tribunal is part of the judiciary. He's made the decision on what happens in that case. So that case has been resolved according to his particular decision. But that's the way the act is set up. When you have two parties in conflict, we try to get them to agree. When they cannot agree, we put them to the tribunal who makes a decision. That's what happened in this case, and that's what will continue to happen. Just like currently now that we have if somebody has a grievance, first of all we try to get the two parties to agree to solution.
So strike is not the answer to grievances. It could be a political move as we approach elections.
Well, hopefully that will not be. The workers will not be used for somebody's own political mileage. The workers are the workers of this country. I'm a former trade unionist myself. I know what it means to be involved in those things. But I think that my focus is always, if there's going to be conflicts, we'll find there are mechanisms and means within the legislation and within the mechanism within my ministry to resolve these things.
Yeah. And I think the Fijians are smart and intelligent people. We've never had strikes, but all of a sudden we are. So you can sort of discern what's happening. And it's always good to make some intelligent and informative decision. And mediation is one way to move forward. So thank you very much for being on Speak Your Mind. You have shared some interesting facts, and I'm sure our audience, our listeners and viewers on FBC TV may have definitely gained a lot through this program today, sir. Wish you all the best, sir, and we hope to have you on our show soon again. Thank you very much. So join me on Speak Your Mind again next week, same time on same station.